Order. Mr. Clacko, can you take roll?
Lori Kniske,
Here.
Belinda Grassi,
Here.
Denise Brewster,
Here.
Scott Fishel,
Here.
Dennis Sweeney.
Here.
Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that brings us to tonight's work session. I do just want to make sure that everybody understands there is no space for public comment on today's agenda because it is a work session and not a regular meeting. So I just want to make everybody aware of that. So, turned over to you, Dr. Rottino.
Super excited today. Today's work session, the topic of it is the state report card. And the 2024 state report card. At eyes look, it looks pretty similar to the 2023 state report card. Overall, we were a 3.5 star rating. That's a combination of all the ratings that are together. The one note is really in early literacy. We rose to 4 stars from 2 stars the prior year. So that really does give a large boost to that one. We'll go over each of the individual items and dig into those in just a minute, but I wanted to take a brief minute to kind of say how we got these overall ratings and where they came from. So the overall ratings, the state of Ohio puts 28% of the weight into achievement, and achievement is the, we'll talk about what that is. That's a performance index score. That's every single test and a weighted value. It is also then 28% into progress. Progress is the value added, or where they were from one year to the next. And then if you have all 5 rates, or all 5 categories, each of those are 14%. So that's graduation rate, gap closing, and early literacy. The one that is not yet rated is college, career, workforce, and military readiness, and that probably will be rated next year, but we don't know because they haven't come out and said it yet. So it's one of those where they've said, we're going to do it sometime, but they don't have a rating system for it yet. So, kind of moving on as to where our schools are individually, if they had a rating they gave them. So all of our schools were at least 3.5 stars overall and above. Buckeye was 4 stars overall. Melridge and Parkside were 4.5 stars. Riverview, Riverside, and John R., and then Lamouth were all 3.5 stars. Our 2-star ratings were in progress at both Riverside and Riverview. And then, like you can see, our early literacy scores, we have 4 stars across the board, with the exception of Buckeye and early literacy. And then in gap closing, Buckeye is 5 stars, as well as Parkside is 5 stars, and then achievement, Melridge, and Parkside are 5 stars. And again, achievement is just the overall PI rate for that school. So these are the individual school scores as a whole. So really happy with all of those results for the year. So the first one we're going to talk about today is achievement. The achievement component is driven from the performance index score. So what this does is it takes every single test and it gives it a value. So if it's untested, it's a value of 0. If it's a limited test, it's a value of 0.5. If it's a basic test, it's a value of 0.7. If it's proficient, it's 1. Accomplished is 1.1, advanced is 1.2, and then you'll see there's this advanced plus, which is 1.3. These are our achievement scores from 2020 since they reset and renormed all the way through this year. And one of the things to note is that our achievement is rising every single year. So we've gone up every year. The other thing to note is the black and the green. Those are the accomplished and advanced scores. That area of the chart seems to get bigger, as well as you can actually see the advanced plus bar this year. So those are the 1.3. Advanced plus are subject accelerated students who score advanced. So they're taking the year ahead. They're taking the test ahead of time because they're subject accelerated in math is where we kind of have those. And then they are scoring advanced on that assessment. So we are getting a visible component of that advanced plus. So that score that they take, they divide that by the highest 2% of the index scores in the state. So it's actually it's 109.3 this year. That rose from last year. And then you get the performance indicator. And then you get your achievement percentage, and that's placed on the 190, 80, or 90, 80, 70 scale. So we were actually at at that 4-star rating for the performance index for our achievement percent, I think 86%, I believe. The one thing that used to happen that does not anymore is the individual performance indicators, or the passage rate, does not factor into rating. What we believe and what the state believes is that every test should matter, and not necessarily did you just hit that passage rate. So every test in this, when you have achievement, every single assessment that is taken matters along the way. We do have some, again this year, that were untested. We did ask for waivers from the state, medical waivers, and we were not granted them. We had some students with some significant medical conditions, but the state said that we needed to test them, and we just did not. And so that's how we got a couple of zeros on that along the way.
Question.
Yeah,
If I heard you correctly, you said 86% and that was a 4-star?
that's force. Yes.
Where do you reach 5-star?
At 90.
And the 4-star goes from what range to what range?
It's 80 to 90%.
Okay.
And last year we were at 83, so we're continuing to grow every year. So we really making strides, and so we are happy about that. So to talk about how we're going to continue to get those scores even higher, I have Dr. Malacher in the bullpen to kind of go with the Guardians theme. So she'll speak a little bit on how we're going to improve each of these ratings and what our plan is along the way.
So part of what we talk about all the time is how do we take this data and make it actionable here at school, you know what I mean, in the classrooms with the teachers working with students. So some of the things that we're doing to work on the achievement component is we have established common assessments, and we've talked about this in the programs meeting for a couple of years now, but we're now utilizing the central reporting system, which is a state system where teachers can create assessments that are modeled after the state test. We can give them along the way throughout the year. Teachers get that data and information back immediately, and we're able to adjust instruction accordingly. And then data-driven decisions are ongoing. So using that data to drive our instruction, which is directly aligned with the standards, which ultimately, obviously, is aligned with the state tests. The curriculum, we have we added additional programming and interventions. So we use Haggerty and Geodes as far as those were additional phonics supports that we added along the way. Wit and Wisdom is our new K2 curriculum, as you know, aligned with the science of reading. We're working on our 3-5. We'll make a decision on that, hopefully mid-year. And then we'll be looking at 6-8 curriculum in reading. And then we have Do the Math, which is a math intervention program that's very structured and prescriptive based on what the students' needs are, and we're finding great success with that. We are doing like I said, a review of the current 3-8 ELA curriculum and the 6-12 math curriculum, which we've talked about in the programs meeting. And we have an increased focus on math and ELA interventions aligned with the curriculum. So we're really looking to pick those interventions, like I said, like Do the Math, that aligns directly with our programming that we have. Teacher-based team meetings, we're focused very much on the MTSS process. For those of you who don't know, MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. We look at that through an academic and a behavior lens. Typically, if a student is exhibiting behaviors that distract from learning, we have to address those behaviors. So those teacher-based or teacher team meetings are focused on this process, looking at how strong is our Tier 1 instruction, which is the instruction that all students get, and then moving them into a Tier 2, which is some targeted interventions, and then Tier 3, which could include testing for special education services if it's warranted. And then finally, scheduling. We've done some things with scheduling to improve how we're able to deliver interventions. So improving delivery of interventions at every level, incorporating intervention and enrichment time, so you'll see that built in. Those of you that have middle schoolers have noticed that's built into the time now. And at the high school level, they also have built in some intervention enrichment time. We've had it at the elementary for several years. We have additional instruction time at the middle school, both in ELA, which is English Language Arts, and math. And we have the implementation, brand new, of the IE time at the high school. So those are things that we're doing that we are hoping will directly impact our achievement scores in this category.
Question. How much time is given to each student, is it based on each student's needs?
Correct.
And
So
then,
some students don't need intervention, so they wouldn't get anything beyond typical instruction.
so what would be the average amount of time a student would get?
It truly depends on what they need. If it's just, let's say you need basic math fact practice, we might do that for 5 minutes a day. If we're talking about you need work on adding and subtracting 3-digit numbers, we might have to work for 15, 20 minutes a day. The intervention enrichment time is typically around 30 minutes per level per day that we have allocated, okay?
And at the high school level, it could be even more specific to like the topic, like a student who needs help with a geometry skill that they didn't do well on a quiz could go during the IE time to get that help right away, instead of going to a math lab, but go actually to their teacher instead of to another math teacher, to get assistance with that. So it does depend on, it's really very student driven and very personalized.
And most of it's within the classroom time?
It's within the school day, so it's either within that classroom time or that designated IE time. That's at all the levels. The other thing is the MTSS, those multi-tiered systems of supports. The academic ones are driven by map assessment data, as well as some of the state testing data as well. So we have multiple points of data, so we can know kind of where their strengths are and break them down and continue to provide those prescriptive, not only interventions, but also kind of where their strengths are to kind of build on those as well.
So you have that data, plus you have some subjectivity, of course, from the teacher.
We do, but the MTSS is really driven from those data points that are there. Okay. Our next area of improvement is progress. Although it's on the 2024 report card, this progress score is growth. It's also called growth or value added. It's actually a 3-year composite. So it's not just data from the 2024 that's reported out. It's 2022, 2023, and then 2024 all together. The 2024 data actually counts twice as much for 50%, and then 21 and 22 count as 25% each. But it basically looks at where a student is and did they make a year's worth of growth. In grades 4 through 8, on those assessments, it's did that student keep their place in line in terms of the entire testing population of Ohio. So in grades 4 through 8 ELA and math is did they stay in the same spot in line from last year to this year, and if they did, they made a year's worth of growth, or 0. In this case, 0 is a good number. So 0 means they made the expected year's worth of growth. They're measured on norm curve equivalence. Basically, every test is taken on a normal, is expected to have a normal distribution, and those NCEs are different than percentiles. Percentiles in the middle of a norm curve are going to be a lot smaller than they are. These are actual equal chunks along the way. So it's a scaled score. And then on a predictive model, so we look at the 5th and 8th grade science tests, as well as all of our end of course exams. Those are based on a predictive score. So they are actually predicting that student's score based on the testing history of every other student who's ever taken that test. So they kind of put it into a prediction. They make a prediction and say, are you above the predicted score or below it? If you hit your predicted score again, you hit a 0, and that's good. And they take the entire lot of tests and put that into the school scores. This is very complex data, and they actually break it out to us by teacher and by school, and by actually what they call quintiles, which are kind of where they expect them to. That data is not released. So this is one of the frustrating ones that is a lot of rich data, but because it's so complex, it takes a lot longer to release to us. So we have the basic overall how we did, but what we don't have is kind of specifically where we can grow and kind of how we can diagnose it to move forward. So that's one thing we're looking forward to at the end of this month. When you look at where our progress is, again, it's...
Question.
Yeah.
On the gain model, 0 is a good score because that's expected growth.
0 is a good score everywhere.
How many scores are there?
So it's actually, it can go up to, I don't know, it can go pretty far. Standard deviations from 0 is what they rank. So it can get, it's a composite, so it's an addition. So it can go 7, 8. We've had some that are even higher than that. And it can go to the negative as well. So when you look at this is just for lack of a better term, it's a heat chart of where our progress composite is. Light blue and dark blue means that we are above. We've met above expected growth expectations, so we're at a 1 or higher. on those light blue. The dark blue means there is significant evidence that we exceeded those growth expectations by a larger magnitude. The green means we hit the zero. So over the 3-year composite, the green means we're at 0. The yellow means that we are below. We fell below those growth expectations, and the red means over 3 years we've fallen significantly below growth expectations. So we have some room to grow. We see our strengths right now are in the English language arts. All the way through, they've either met or exceeded with the exception of 6th grade. Our progress in math, we know we have some growth to do for all grades, as well as 5th and 6th grade and 8th grade as well. Science, we are, again, gray is nothing. In 4th grade, and overall in science, we're meeting that growth, but kind of as that composite, because some areas are a little bit larger, we are not meeting in the 5th and the 8th grade test as well. And as for all tests, we're a little bit below, which is why we have the 2-star rating overall of the composite. But again, we see some bright pockets, and we see some areas that we really need to focus on, and some areas of improvement that we've got some plans in place. For the EOC scores, for the ones they predict, English and geometry are significantly above where they were predicted to go. Algebra is just a little bit below for the 3-year composite. American history and American government are some challenge areas and some areas for growth. Some of those are because we need to see the actual data to kind of dig those out. We've got some hypotheses as to why those are low, but we want to make sure we kind of can figure those out. Our AP students take the AP assessment as well as the end of course assessment. The AP assessment has very different questions than the end of course assessment. We don't necessarily think they give the same effort to those EOCs that they do to the AP test. So we're going to take a look at where they're expected to grow, because those high-end kids are supposed to be, the students who are in AP are typically the ones who are predicted to score in those high ends. We're going to see if they score in about the same level and kind of what that is. And we'll take a look at those once we get that data. It actually brings it down to the student level, so we can look at it from there and say, okay, maybe we'll go with a different strategy. Because the AP test actually counts. If they take the AP test, they do not have to take the EOC test, but we've been giving them both. So we're going to look at that as we go forward. So part of it is almost a strategy in how you're moving forward with that.
I want just to make sure I understand too, this one is the measurement that if a student enters as an honor student, right, and they're looking for the same growth for that student as any other student in the state too, correct?
Yes, it's where that student is. So if that student is 5th in line in the state, last year, they're supposed to be 5th in line again in the state this year. And if they are 5th, then they made 0 growth. If they're 4th, they made 1. If they're 6th, they made -1. Basically, is kind of how that works. It's on these norm curves, but that's basically a more simpler way to put it.
Okay.
So one of the things I wanted to take a look at and just show is, although 3 years, we've got some pockets, again, we are improving every year. So when you look at 1-year gain, so this is just the 3 years, we're not talking about the composite, this is one single year. So this is growth in 21, 22, 22, 23 is the black, and then 23, 24, which would be last year. You're seeing our growth is improving. Now, some are still below the line, and we know we need to work on that, but they're showing the improvement. Our overall is right at that 0 level, which is we would have met and we would have been 3 stars had it just been the 1 year. But since it's the composite, we actually carry that larger gray overall, and that will drop off next year as we kind of go through. So it's the last 3 years. So we're going to continue to make growth. As long as we continue on the trajectory we're at, we're making growth along the way. We know, again, math is one that we're working on to continue to grow. We need to personalize math a little bit more as we move through it, and that's an area we are. But if you look at the numbers, those bars are a bit deceiving. Math, we're still at -2, but those bars are still, they're not as big as you would think. And we can make that up as we move through and continue to grow. So that's an area we are focusing on. This is just a 4 through 8 tests in the EOC tests. When you look at those, we again are seeing growth, especially in biology. Biology's growth is really, it went from -97 to 4.8 in the 3-year period. English language arts is making great growth as well. Algebra 1, we had some struggles in that first year in 21-22 we're at 23-24, 0.09 is we've met a year's growth. Not where we wanted to be the year before. We're still above the line, which is what we're looking for. That means our teachers are actually doing their job and meeting that year's growth. We know in geometry as well, we are still above. It's not as high as it was, but we're still making above growth. We know in, again, merit, government, and history, those are the ones we want to take a closer look at to specifically see why that is and specifically see where. So those are the ones we know we have some struggle and growth with, but those are ones once this full data comes out, we'll take a look at it and go from there.
So in government, don't CCP kids can take government? They don't have to take the.
They do not. If a CCP student takes government or even history, that score counts for their grade. They are exempt, so they don't take it. APs currently take it, but it's a different test than the AP test, obviously. And then anyone, and that's about, those are the ones who are exempt from it.
So that could be affecting
it
the
can
more
impact
kids
it
that
as well.
take CCP.
Yeah. ELA2, they all have to take. So ELA2 and algebra are graduation tests. Every student has to take those and score at least competent on those. The other ones are not. So the biology, they do have to have a science test per the federal guidelines. So if you take AP biology, you're taking both assessments. But that's a 10th grade class, and we don't see as many CCP students in biology. But if they're taking AP, they're taking both the AP test and the biology test as well. Geometry is one where it's a one-shot test where they're taking it once, and it has no impact on a grade. Like biology, if you pass that test, you get a graduation seal. Geometry there's no benefit for that student to pass that test other than to show their knowledge. So we are working to really incentivize that test as well, and that is the fourth test that typically most of our sophomores take in a grueling week of state testing, a period of state testing. So how are we going to improve progress, and what's our plan?
So continuous improvement in the progress area really focuses on a lot of instructional strategies. So the Riverside Way, which is a document created with teachers and administration about our expectations for learning in every classroom. So we've established that, teachers are becoming familiar with it, and we're working through that process through our personalized learning professional development. And we're also implementing instructional rounds, which is a practice that the medical field has been doing for years, but it's where you go into other classrooms and you see good teaching and you identify those practices that maybe you need to get better at, or we as a district might identify a practice that we see we need to improve on, and then we identify places that teachers can go and see that practice in action. Personalized learning cohorts, so we're increasing the amount of professional development that's happening for teachers. It's happened for administrators last year, and it's ongoing for teachers now, not only in district, but through several different outside organizations and cohorts of teachers doing that. We've worked with the data analysis protocol to implement a common means for collecting and tracking data so that they're able to analyze it common across the board. And then finally, through curriculum, implementation of targeted programming to address student needs and deficits. A lot of these you'll see overlap, so some, you know what I mean? So things that we do just won't affect progress. Curriculum changes, it will also affect achievement. So a lot of my continuous improvement piece will be ongoing.
One of the things we've talked a lot about is that competency-based personalized learning, and that's a big focus for us as a district, and getting those cohorts together to make sure, and they do definitely impact both not only the progress rate, but also the achievement, as well as gap closing, which we'll get to in a minute, because it does give students what they need at that point to kind of move them forward. So we're putting those things in place to really make sure we give all students what they need to be successful and to show growth. And we've seen in the teacher value added scores, the individual ones, those who have utilized some of those personalized learning strategies are showing greater gains and greater growth gains, and they're a testimony better than even we can say, hey, this is really good stuff, to continue to pass that on and continue that best practice. So gap closing. Gap closing takes a look at different subgroups and different levels, and it's one of those kind of hodgepodge grades where they throw a bunch of stuff in there and give you points for each. It basically looks at the amount of subgroups you have. To count as a subgroup, so this is a lot. To count as a subgroup, you have to have at least 15 students in that subgroup. And so they look at, first of all those subgroups, and they give us a total possible points. So we have 9 possible subgroups for English language arts achievement. And in those subgroups, we met 8 of those possible 9 points. So they gave us a target, and if you're at or above that target, you get a point. If you're below it, you don't. I think we missed this one for special education students in 1 grade. Math achievement, the same way. 8 of 9, we missed it for special education for sure. In 7 of 8 for English language arts growth. In this case, we only had 50. Because 3rd grade does not have a growth score, we don't necessarily have we lose a subgroup out of there. So because of that, we only dropped 8 subgroups, and we met 7 out of 8. In math, and like I showed earlier, math, that's not a surprise. Math growth, we didn't hit a single point because we didn't make growth. We were consistent in struggling in our math growth. So that's where we really need to focus our personalized learning efforts. Graduation, we only have 6 subgroups of graduation. Those are students who walked across. We met 5 out of 6 of those. We missed 1, but I forget which one that one was specifically. English learners. So specifically, are they improving on the OELPA test, the Ohio English Learning Proficiency Assessment? We had 5 of those. Those are grade levels, and we met all 5 of those. So our ELL program is to be commended for that. Chronic absenteeism. Our chronic absenteeism is an area of focus for us this year as well. Part of it is some of the identified, when we looked at it specifically, some of our identified reporting practices and how we shift that. So we did not meet those in those subgroups, so that's something we're going to struggle, or we're going to work with. Gifted progress. These are our students who are identified as gifted in either language arts, math, or superior cog. In gifted progress, we met all of those for our gifted students. Again, this is where personalized learning really benefits us. We can personalize, so not only for to raise them up, but also to push and stretch, and to stretch our students. Gifted performance index, this is either you get it or you don't, and it's a really high score, and we did not get it. We were close. We have never reached this number in Riverside historically. We are working to get there, and we're continuing to get closer to it, but we have not yet hit to that point. And then gifted identification and services, we improved this last year, but when they take the collection, they take it really early in the year, and we did not have the staff appropriately trained and identified at that time and the plans in place. I suspect this number is going to go up significantly for next year because you have to have plans signed off on and all that. So this is really a paperwork item that we worked hard to get in place that last year to make sure we're getting some of these points along the way. So our preliminary reports were 38 out of 65, and that gave us the 4 stars on this. A couple of things that on the next slide we get to is to kind of look at where we are, and this really puts it in these are our subgroups along the way and kind of what are there. The green is we simply met it. The red is we didn't meet it. So when you look at kind of where we are, these are the ones specifically how these points came about. The not met in math growth with a star means that they showed expected growth, but they didn't meet the target because the target is 1. And they had a 0, or they were between 0 and 1. So they didn't meet that growth target, but they actually met the 0, which is showing the year's growth in that case. The other one in English learners, we met all of those improvement goals. Chronic absenteeism, you see, is 19.1%. Our goal is less than 18.3%. Chronic absenteeism is being marked absent 10% of the year, or 65 hours for that. For the year, that's about 10 school days, and where we see it the most is typically at our high school, and that's coming from some of our prior practices where if a student has early release or a first or a fourth block study hall, they might sometimes show up late. They missed the class. They didn't miss any academics, but they just weren't there, and those hours kind of counted as chronic absenteeism. So we've changed some of our reporting practices to make sure, because they're not missing instructional time, and this is really meant for instructional time along the way. And then gifted, we met the value added, but our PI was 115.8, and the goal was 118. So that is where we are with that. So how do we work on gap closing? A lot of these strategies are a repeat because we know what good instruction looks like.
So the Riverside Way and instructional strategies, which I talked about when we talked about progress, is the same in the personalized learning cohort. So those are things that we're doing with teachers to help them get better at their craft. Curriculum-wise, we did have an implementation of a new curriculum at the high school level for English learners. So we're hoping to see that score stay strong and continuous improvement in that area. Gifted credentials. So we provided optional professional development for teachers to grow their skills in working with gifted students. This will help with the service portion of the report card where it was identification and services. So we're providing that for teachers. And then we have a focus on developing and implementing the written education or acceleration plans for identified gifted students. So like Dr. Rotino said, part of this was a paperwork thing where we needed to fill these, make sure these plans were filled out, and then we have to have a certified, credentialed, maybe is a better word, not certified, a credentialed teacher, which we are doing through these professional development opportunities, provide services to students who have these plans. So that's how we'll continue to work on that area. And then the chronic absenteeism, as Dr. Rotino said, we have reviewed our reporting procedures, and we think we have figured out how to do accurate reporting in the system so that it isn't recording students as chronically absent when they're doing a late arrival or early dismissal during a study hall at the high school. And then we also have we're working on the implementation of positive behavior supports to address the increase in the absenteeism. So part of making sure kids aren't absent is making sure they want to come to school. And that's part of what the positive behavior support system is about, is engaging students who may have historically been disengaged from school, trying to get them to want to be here rather than to want to be at home.
Chronic absenteeism. Yeah.
Question, on the gifted credentials, how many teachers do we have right now? How many do we need, and how many are being trained?
So it is an optional professional development, so I don't know who has signed up this year. Mrs. Weber is our gifted coordinator, so she would be able to give that, and I could do that at the next programs meeting. So I'm not sure how many teachers are being trained. How many we need it would be a fluctuating answer, I think. It depends on how many students we have to serve. So if we have 10 students in a class, probably one teacher. If we have multiple students, what I'd like to see us do is, for example, our AP teachers, because we have a lot of students who are identified that take AP classes. If we could encourage those teachers to take the professional development, then an AP class could count as a gifted service. So those are some of the things, working within what we already have, how we could meet that criteria with the teachers and the staff and the classes that we already have.
And it's two parts. It's not only having the teachers certified. We've had gifted certified teachers, and we have them at Lamouth who teach our honors, ELA and our honors math. But then it's also the paperwork part of it, and that's the part that we just really had some opportunities to pick up last year, where we utilized some people to kind of help and start those plans. So now they're just a rolling, updating and kind of sending them out. But we had to get under the mountain, and so we started to move that mountain and kind of really shift it. So now we're in a really good spot with those gifted credentials. The one thing I do want to mention about chronic absenteeism is it is not just us who are showing this. This is a nationwide epidemic with absenteeism, chronic absenteeism in schools. We are seeing this. The governor just mentioned it yesterday about the state, but also we're seeing it throughout the nation. After COVID, we are seeing a lot of different behaviors. It used to be, give your kid a couple Tylenol, send them to school, see what happens. Now it's if you have a sniffle, we were telling them to stay home. There's been some behavioral changes, as well as all the things that are taking kids out of school. So anytime a student is not in school, whether it's excused or unexcused, those hours count. Well, we're seeing a lot more students who are involved in all these extracurriculars that they're traveling for. All your AAU basketball, volleyball, those sorts of things, those tournaments, they will also pull them out of school as well. Doctor's appointments, there's not as many on off school hours or during the day. If they don't come back with that doctor's note and just say they were at an appointment, we believe you. But if we don't have that note, those hours count. But if we have the medical note, then actually they don't and they're exempt. So it's some of that is also just in follow through, making sure we get that as well. So we're working to kind of put some real tight procedures in place to help with that, and also just to encourage kids to want to be at school. That's a really big thing as well. Okay, graduation rate. We were 3 stars in graduation rate. Graduation rate simply is not as simple as percentage of seniors who walked across the stage. It's a little bit more complex than that. There are two rates that calculate into it, the 4-year rate and the 5-year rate. And graduation rate, again, this is one that we are cleaning up, and it's a reporting issue. This is every student who we registered in 4 years ago as a Riverside student. Where did they graduate from a high school? Doesn't have to be Riverside High School, but did they graduate? If we reported them to the state reporting system in 4 years, if they graduated and completed their program, they're counted. If they didn't and fell off, they are dinged against us. Or what happened is, so you think of 2020, which is 4 years ago from this group, so 1920, that year when we shut down, those freshmen, if they moved and we didn't kind of know because we weren't in school, we lost track of them, they counted as a non-graduate. Even if they moved out of state, we would have to report them as moved out of state. But if we don't know where they moved, they still counted on our books and they count as non-graduates. So that's why our graduation rate is improved from 91.9%, but we know that because we know where students are now, we've really done our due diligence in tracking them and making sure we're finding. I really do expect that graduation rate to go up a lot higher in the future. But graduation rate is one that's impacted by COVID, and not because of COVID stopped graduation. COVID really influenced and impacted the tracking of where students are, especially when they were as they were either remote and didn't necessarily attend, or they may have moved to a different school and didn't either enroll, went to homeschool, maybe went to private school who doesn't use an SSID number where we can track. So all we track are with public schools. So if a student goes from here to Painesville City, that SSID and that state number tracks with them, and it's an easy one-to-one tracking, and it's real simple. We both have to register them with the state, and the state kind of compares them and says, okay, this student's not on your books anymore, now it's on Painesville City's books. If a student goes from here to NDCL didn't have to track them. So NDCL can tell us they enrolled there, or they don't have to. So we don't necessarily know. Sometimes we will roll our 8th graders over into high school early and report them being, hey, we're ahead of the game. We haven't cleared up those who aren't here. So I think one of the things is really making sure we have a great EMIS coordinator and a knowledgeable EMIS coordinator to help clean some of that up in that 9th grade year and understand the importance of that and how this tracks is going to improve that as well. So we graduated a lot of the students who we had in the senior class. We know of some who didn't, but the ones who we lost are really those ones who they went somewhere else because of the time off, and we didn't necessarily get them. And again, a percentage in a class of 300 is 3 students. So we're looking at really small numbers as we move through. Our 5-year graduation rate was 91.8%. So we improved from the 4-year rate, but again, that's also because of the students who are tracked. So we think this year, we know this rate's going to go significantly higher for next year. The 4-year rate counts for 2/3 of the score, and I think the 5-year rate is 1/3 of the total score. We were met. I mean, again, 3 stars isn't bad. 3 stars means you're doing your job as expected by the state. We know this is going to be higher next year.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So we register a kid in 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
They go to Painesville City in 9th grade. We are still responsible for whether that kid graduates or not?
We are responsible for that student to go to Painesville City. As soon as they're on Painesville City's books, they're off of ours.
Okay.
Where sometimes it hurts us is we register a student in 9th grade. That student says, okay, in 10th grade I'm going to go to an online school.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to an online charter school. They have to log in. That student does not log in for so many hours, and I think it's 30 hours consistent. So if they don't log in for a certain time, that charter school by law has to withdraw them because the funding leaves them. And they're supposed to notify us. The key word is supposed to. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they notify us a lot later and it's almost too late. So they're supposed to notify us, hey, there's a student in your district that has been withdrawn, and then we have to bring them back in because they're self-compulsory attendance age. So that's the biggest one with graduation rate. We see some of the loss, especially during those COVID. They still wanted the online options. They went to that school. Online wasn't working for them. The online school withdrew them. They didn't let us know that, hey, they withdrew them. Or they did let us know. We said, hey, come on back. The parents said, no, we're not. We're going to do something else. But then necessarily didn't do anything else, and we continue to try to follow up. But that's where we're at with graduation rate. So how are we improving graduation rate? Well, I talked about the first one. That was cohort tracking.
It was, and I like to try to explain acronyms but I don't really know what EMIS stands for, but what I will tell you is it is where we put our data in that the state pulls from to analyze and provide us with our scores. So for a lot of years, we didn't have an EMIS coordinator here in district. We used someone at the ESC of the Western Reserve, and we found that we just didn't understand the data. Bad data in produces bad results out. And so a lot of what Dr. Rotino has brought to the table, and now that we have an in-house EMIS coordinator, I actually just met with her the other day. She's understanding this side of it, the report card side of it, and I'm trying to understand the back side of it, where the data goes in and how it feeds into this. So we're doing a lot more communication. When we talk about cleaning that data up, that's what Dr. Rotino is referring to. So tracking those cohorts a little bit better, but also we have to track credentials. So that's another thing that's on here, embedded credentials. So with the addition of different ways students can graduate, we have to track when they earn credentials and how many points they get and what classes they get those points in. So all of that has to be tracked. So we're working on that. And we have embedded credentials so students are able to find an alternative pathway to graduation if they can't or don't pass. And I won't belabor you with the whole graduation. You don't just finish your classes and get a diploma anymore. For those of you who don't know that, graduation is much more difficult. There's 3 buckets that the kids have to fill in order to hit graduation. So one of them is passing classes, but there are 2 other areas that they need to address in order to graduate. So earning some of those credentials allows that to happen. Implementing the career electives, which again provides opportunities for students to earn credential points, is something that we've worked really hard on the past year or 2. Targeted tutoring, which is proactive to try to make sure before they take the second test, if students fail the end of course exam for English Language Arts 2, which is their 10th grade language arts, or Algebra 1, they have to retake the test at least one time before they can use an alternative path to graduation. So in addition to providing alternative pathways to graduation, we're also providing targeted interventions to those students who didn't pass the test the first time. We have an in-house credit recovery program now, which is helping students, again, to hit that bucket for graduation where they have to earn credits. And then we also have implemented the mental health support access at school. So for students who need that, whose parents are approve that, we have that access to help get them, again, that positive behavior support to help get them ready to learn. So those are some of the things we're doing to work on the graduation rate.
Early literacy, this is one where we got 4 stars. Hang on, this is the hardest one I have to explain. Those other ones were hard, this one's really hard. So early literacy is every fall we give our students who enter from kindergarten to 3rd grade a diagnostic reading assessment, and then we identify them as on track or off track. The next fall we give them another diagnostic assessment. For those students who are identified as off track, if we move them to on track from one fall to the next, we get credit for it. If they remained off track, we do not, and they show up in red. The only difference is students in 3rd grade who identify as off track in the fall of 3rd grade, we get credit for them if they actually pass the entire 3rd grade ELA assessment. We get credit for them and they're considered to be on track because it is on track to pass the assessment. However, the scores do not line up with the predictive score, so it's a little bit lower than that case. When you see in this case, so in kindergarten, we moved 75% of our students who enter kindergarten as off track. 2 years ago to the fall of last year, they identified as on track. So the work we're doing in kindergarten to get our students ready is really productive. Now, they're not the same students from year to year, so we don't take the 24 students. We may have some students who were identified as on track who kind of fall off, so they start all over again, and it's a new denominator every single year along the way. But that's a portion of it. The other portion of what's our proficiency score in 3rd grade and how many of our students are promoted to 4th grade. So those 3 scores together make up our scale, which was 78.6%, which was 4 stars along the way. So that is our early literacy. Again, the first state assessment our students take is in 3rd grade, and then they take the ELA. They take that twice. They take it in the fall, and they take it in the spring, and then they take the math test in the spring. What are we doing to finish that up?
So data reporting, thank you, Mr. Schlick and Mr. Carabine. Apparently, it's the Educational Management Information System. For any of you who are dying to know what EMIS meant, that is what EMIS stands for. But again, those data reporting protocols, what the information that we're putting in and making sure it gets reported accurately and on time. Phonics support, so we've been talking about this in the programs meeting, and I just think, Mr. Fischel, I know, and I can't remember who else was on that committee at the time when we talked about implementing Haggerty and buying the Geodes books, and all of those kinds of things are supporting our youngest learners in that very foundational piece of what we're doing, and I think we're starting to see the fruits of our labor at that, of the money and the time that we put into training teachers, so that's very exciting to see. Like I talked about, the MTSS, again, the multi-tiered systems of support, establishing that protocol to try to catch kids at those younger ages that need additional support, and then what targeted interventions are we going to do for those students? And then finally, curriculum-wise, the implementation of Wit and Wisdom for our K-2 students, which is a program, although we had to pick from things that the state laid out. We had to pick from programs that the state had approved. Wit and Wisdom is what we chose based on the science of reading, so we're hoping that's just implemented this year to see continual growth and improvement in this area.
So would you say that Geodes has been a successful program?
I would say Geodes and the Haggerty Phonics, which we do with kindergarten, which we also purchased and implemented and trained teachers on. Yes, I think they're having an impact. It's all coming together. All those programs work well together, and I think we're finally seeing it. It's taken a while,
Well,
and everything in education takes a while.
I remember when we talked about it because it looked like a
Probably
good
2 years
program
ago,
coming in.
2 or 3,
Yeah.
yeah, 2.5 years ago.
I think the one thing that's not on here that we've also done too are these fidelity checks, where we've gone in and made sure that these programs are being done with fidelity and not just being checked off the boxes. That's a really important piece of it, to make sure that we are teaching it to the expected depth that is there. So I think that's a big thing as well.
Yeah,
So,
we're still using foundations, right?
Yes, that's our core
That's the
phonics
core
program.
college, career, workforce, and military readiness, the ungraded grade, if you would, along the way. College, career, workforce, and military readiness, the CCWMR, is a measure of how prepared graduating class is as they transition to post-secondary education. So these are a lot of things you can check the box, and if you check any one of the boxes, you're counted as a yes. Again, this is a lot of reporting, but you can earn an honors diploma, you can earn an industry-recognized credential. I believe is that a 6.1 on that one, or I think
I
it's
was
6 or
looking at
12.
my next slide, not
Oh.
listening to you.
Oh, okay. Not a problem. Dual enrollment credit, so a CCP course. So if you get credit at CCP, you check the box. Score remediation free on the ACT or the SAT. 3 or higher on AP test. Again, that's what checks the box. Enlist in the military. So if you're enlisted, you are ready for the military. Gain acceptance into a recognized apprenticeship program, not a pre-apprenticeship, but actually an apprenticeship program. Complete the recognized, you can complete one as well, so you can gain acceptance to some. Some you have to be 18 to gain acceptance to, others you can complete along the way. Score proficient or better on CTE technical assessments. So our Auburn students take these assessments at the end of the year. If they score proficient or better, and we get those back and report them in time, they get checked. So again, this is also does the data come back in time for us to report it? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Earn the Ohio Means Job Readiness Seal, and complete 250 hours of work-based learning. The majority of our juniors in English 11 earn the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal. That's a unique thing to Riverside. It's the 250 hours of work-based learning that we don't know whether they have or not, but that's a way to kind of check the box as well. If the careers they want are going to, and that's also kind of ways we're looking at the paths of our career electives and where they go when we talk about those things. This is one of those where that work-based learning can become a part.
Question.
Yeah.
Can you identify how many identifiable apprenticeship programs we have available?
Currently, we have the pre-apprenticeship for construction, and I believe that's the only one.
No
Yes.
apprenticeships.
No, we have no apprenticeship at this point. So what are we doing to improve this?
So, continuous improvement for the alphabet soup. College career, workforce, and military readiness. And Mrs. Westbrook said you were talking about industry credentials. Those are actually points that students earn based on industry recognizing certain skill sets. They assign points to those. So for example, if you get an OSHA certification, you can earn 1 point. In order to check that box for industry credentials, students have to earn 12 points in one career pathway. So you can't cherry pick, oh, I like a little healthcare, I like a little business, I like a little advanced manufacturing, and put those together. You have to get 12 out of a prescribed list. And that's what we've created for students here at Riverside, to be able to earn those 12 points in particular pathways. So the career electives is what I just talked about, where students are earning points towards industry credentials. We adding additional AP courses, which again is one of those things that they look at. We just added AP Research this year. Last year we added AP Environmental Science. So embedding credentials and seals, English 4, they're doing leadership, student leadership and Lean Six Sigma training. For student leadership, they earn 3 points. For Lean Six Sigma, they earn 3 points. Those 6 points cross all career pathways. So every student at Riverside is earning at minimum 6 points. If they go into the career electives, they earn the other 6 to make 12. And then in English 3, Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal, all of our English 3 students are doing that program and earning that seal. We have the pre-apprenticeship program, like Dr. Rattino said, Mr. Fischel asked about. We currently offer 1 in construction. We're evaluating the viability of our advanced manufacturing, which is a course that we put on hold this year, but we will be bringing back with new equipment in our brand new CTE space that will be coming soon. And whether or not we can align with Alliance for Working Together, which is AWT, and become a pre-apprenticeship for their organization. And then dual enrollment College Credit Plus. We aligned our welding program with Lakeland's welding program. So students in our welding program are actually earning college credits. This year, just a few of them, but next year we're hoping to increase that number, which is really exciting. Our welding teacher, who's phenomenal, by the way, Mr. Blank, works very closely with the welding teacher at Lakeland. We take our kids over there to use their facilities. They help build our program, so we're very much aligned. So for those students in welding to know that college is an option, I think is a really huge deal. So again, it's all about opportunities and providing those experiences for students so they can make better informed decisions after they graduate.
That's not considered CCP anymore, is it? Because they took those courses out of the CCP core, I guess you could call
I
it.
think it's dual enrollment now. I
Right,
think
that
they call
it's
it that.
outside of CCPs. How do we pay for that?
Now you're out of my purview, Mrs. Grassi. I'm going to let Gary talk.
Because it's totally different. Because I remember, like, that was a number of years ago, probably 5 years ago, they said you couldn't take those advanced manufacturing classes at Lakeland and have it be considered CCP.
They're not. They're
Right.
taking it here, and our instructor is aligned with what they're doing at, I don't know how the payment happens.
Right?
I don't know.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce is really putting a big push onto career technical and this dual enrollment and all that. So it's recently shifted to these career technical dual enrollment type courses, because what the research shows is that if you get credits in high school, you're going to get more credits and you're going to continue on because you start to develop the success. So that's kind of why that those are being done. But it's not under the true the CCP umbrella. I know even the admission requirements for those technical enrollment courses are lower than a typical student who would go to take like a CCCP algebra or some of that aspect. But I don't know where I don't even know if there is additional funding tied to those or
Like, do
additional
we pay,
costs.
like, do we pay for those? Because you know how we have to pay for the CCP students to go.
Right, I'm not
I
aware
would
of
assume
it, I don't
it's
know
the
what
same
we'll pay
thing.
to it.
Yeah.
You know, College Credit Plus comes out of our state funding payments, and then we pay Lakeland directly for the textbooks for
right.
those students, but as far as this one, I'm not aware, I'd have to
I'm
look
just
into
curious.
that a little bit more.
Sorry,
That's
I
okay.
stumped you.
No, one of the things about this speaks to, it's a lot of recording and reporting to make sure that each student has a checkbox somewhere. So our guidance department, our EMIS coordinator, our principals are all making sure that as we go through and do these graduation audits, that we have the right boxes checked in the student software so they get the credit for it. So that's another reason why we are there. So the last slide,
Before you start on this one, Dr. Martino, can I add one more thing?
absolutely.
No, you can flip the slide. You guys can't see this, but when you go home and you want to pour over this data, because I know you're all dying to see those very teeny tiny numbers up there.
I love it.
I want to point out that the last one that we talked about, which was the college career workforce readiness, I want you to look at the numbers, the percentage. This isn't graded yet, but for the first time, I feel like as a school district, we are ahead of the game. And if you look at where we fall in these percentages, as far as are our students ready by state standard for life after high school,
Wait, that's-
we're doing pretty well for something they're not giving us an official grade on yet. So we are ahead of the game, a progressive district, I like to think of in this area. We're providing those credentials, we're providing those opportunities for students to have while they're here, so that when they leave us, they are ready to make those better informed decisions. So just something I wanted to point out, because that's one area we've worked really hard on, and I think that as a district, we should be really proud of the opportunities that we're providing to our students.
Okay, I have a question about the math. You mentioned a review of the curricular materials that are being used. We know that from the programs committee that the state is going to be turning their attention to math, but I don't know when that is. But with the science of reading, they gave us a list to choose from on what we're teaching. So in the meantime, we're still doing our own assessment, and I guess my concern is how many different programs do we have, and do they flow? And I know there's different areas like geometry, algebra, but I'm just talking about even going up through to the middle school.
So we have one program that we use K-5, and we have a program that we use 6-12. So we don't have multiple programs. We
Okay.
have one so they flow one into another. I also have heard now a revision on that state directive that they are not going to go down the same path with math. That is the latest that I have heard, that they're not going to give us set curriculums that we have to pick from. But we are in the process of reviewing curriculum for 6th through 12th grade.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So this last slide is all the Lake County schools and the raw scores that make up the star ratings that you see. So in other words, Kirtland was 5 stars, but they have 4.7 points, and on each of the report card, there's a conversion to it. To point to what this is, we were the 4th in Lake County for overall. We're kind of sitting, we're above Willoughby Eastlake, we're above Madison. When you look at performance index, you can see we were again the 4th in performance index. Value added, or gap closing, we know we need to work on that. But again, we're actually above Perry in our gap closing, so we're the 3rd in that one. So when you look at comparative through the county, we're kind of right sitting in the middle. The ones where you see progress is one that we definitely need to make improvements on. We know we need to kind of continue that. That's the value added one. Along the way, graduation rate, like I said, we are going to improve upon that as well. One thing I took off of this is enrollment. So when you look at graduation rate for us and our size compared to a graduation rate of a Kirtland and their class size, it's a very different number along the way. There are pluses and minuses to that. Obviously we have more in the denominator, but then also to track those students and all that is a little bit more to make sure we track them.
When you're talking class size, you mean like a whole grade, a whole
Yes,
ninth grade?
yes, yeah, like 300.
Number of students
yep.
in ninth grade?
Yes, yep, the 320 students, 200 or so in 9th grade. And then if a student enters in 10th grade and we put them on our books, but they still count in that class if they're in that cohort, and then they come off. So the cohort's a lot bigger than the class itself, actually, because of some student transiency. The district ranking of OFCC evaluation per pupil, that's how the OFCC determines wealth. We've talked about the OFCC list a lot. This is the FY24 list, and for anyone who's wondering, we are 514 on the list. You'll see Kirtland is the last in Lake County to get any money. Mentor is before that. Perry is a little bit before us, but that's because they have the power plant, which is a lot of wealth, but does not count for the OFCC money as well. And then you'll see I also did assessed property value and then total operating per pupil. And you'll see we are still one of the lowest in Lake County for dollars we spend per pupil. We are on the bottom half of that chart, but yeah, we are still not necessarily performing there. We're performing much higher than what we spend on our students. So really, really happy with everyone involved and proud of the growth we're making. And I think that, you know, now that we're closer to the top of those rankings, if we continue this upward trajectory, we're going to see these scores go up next year. And with that, any questions?
Thank you.
That was that thorough. All right. I like it.
All right, that brings us to training work session. So work session for the district's legal counsel provide training regarding the proper use of social media. The Board of Education will discuss this topic following the training. Mr. McIntyre?
Thank you very much. So this is part 2 in what is now a series of trainings, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you tonight about the proper use of social media. I'm focused strictly, though, on the proper use of social media by board members. There's a whole set of rules that applies to the use of social media by employees. They're very different than those that apply to board members. You're elected officials, and it's a different role that you're viewed as under Ohio law. So the first thing I'd like to start out by saying, and I have 7 points to make, is that there was a very important case decided this year by the U.S. Supreme Court. It was a unanimous decision, and it was reached in March of 2024, and it's commonly referred to as the Freed decision. And in that case, the court decided whether an elected official on social media is acting in their personal capacity or in their official capacity as an elected official. The question that the court decided is, under what circumstance is that elected official who's posting on social media really functioning as an individual, and when are they really functioning as a board member? Because there's a big difference. The difference is that a whole bunch of rules apply when you're functioning as a board member. We talked about a bunch of them last time. And those rules don't apply when you're functioning in your personal capacity as an individual. So determining that question is really a matter of intent and a matter of content. So the court has said, if it appears that you're functioning as a state actor, is the court's language, meaning you're in your official capacity, then the things that apply to you are the Open Meetings Act, the Ohio Public Records Act, the First Amendment. So we have the rule here in Riverside that says if you're going to speak to the media, if you're going to make public statements, then you have to essentially say, I'm not speaking for the rest of the board. I'm not speaking for the district. These are my own personal views. That disclaimer is required under our board bylaws. The reason that disclaimer exists is so that you can define for the public whether you're functioning as an individual, non-board member, or whether you're functioning as a board member, essentially on behalf of the district. I think it's really important to say this is my personal account, not a district account. And I think it's really important to say that these views are my own. However, if you're talking about board business on your account, the law may very well view you as conducting yourself in an official capacity. Even though you say it's personal, and even though you say these are my own views, if you're using your account to function or to comment on or to address matters of board business, the courts could say you're really functioning as a board member, not as an individual. And if that's the case, then the Open Meetings Act applies. So if another board member decides to comment on your post, and then maybe a third board member decides to comment on that post, now you have essentially what's called a serial meeting, and that type of discussion shouldn't be taking place by social media. It should be taking place at an open meeting, properly noticed, for the public to attend. The other factor is that the Public Records Act may apply. And if the Public Records Act applies, then that means we have to retain all of those posts. And we have to be able to produce those posts if and when we receive a public records request for them. And then the other consideration is that if you're acting in your official capacity, again, even though you said it's my personal account, and even though you said these are my own views, if somebody says something that's disparaging about you or your views, and you take that comment down, you've essentially violated the First Amendment. Because when we have an open forum as a school district, we can't regulate what people say based on their content. So, for example, at a board meeting, we have public participation. When we let people say what they want to say, we can't regulate that based on their content. The same would go for a social media account. And so there are potential liabilities here. If, again, it's viewed as an official action, that post, then we have the Public Records Act, we have open meetings, and we have the First Amendment, all of which can lead to significant liabilities for the district. So I am not a proponent of the use of social media by any board member unless it is strictly for personal activities. Family, you took a recent trip, you're commenting on a neighbor's whatever new project, you know all the social media things, but that are very personal. When you get into board business, you are very much in that gray area of whether you are functioning as an individual or whether you're functioning as a board member. And that's where we have potential problems. The other factor here is boardsmanship. As a matter of good boardsmanship, and we talked a lot about this last time, it's really important that we express whatever personal views we have at the table. We have good discussion, good deliberation about whatever topic is in front of the board. But once that issue's been decided, it's critical that we accept the will of the majority. That's in our school board handbook. That is considered best practice in the state of Ohio. And it's really important that we try to honor that to the best of our ability. That's not to say that you don't have your own individual voice. You do. But once an issue's been decided, it's important that we accept the will of the majority. And social media can be very divisive in that way. And so I guess I have 3 takeaways for you. One is, if you want to keep your social media account personal, if you want it to remain personal, then please do not use it for anything having to do with school business. Number 2, don't ever block users or delete comments because of something they may say about you or your views or the district. And then number 3, consider having a social media bylaw or policy for this district that would govern all of your use of social media. It might be a good way of coming to some mutual understanding about what is and is not acceptable as a matter of self-governance for this district, especially the board members. So those are the 7 points I wanted to make. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and I know that you would like to have some discussion about that, and I'm happy to participate in that.
Does Neola have any recommended verbiage? Because I know we should be getting a policy. I mean, we can ask them for that if they have it.
Yes, I have seen something from Neola on the use of social media. We have a general use of social media policy, but it doesn't really go to the board-specific issues as in the kind of detail that I think is really important. Most organizations now have social media policies just to make sure that everybody understands where the boundaries are. And again, for staff members, it's a completely different set of rules. And so that policy could also address the boundaries for staff as well.
Would you be able to provide some sample policies that are written on that?
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
I just want to make, I think you touched on this at the beginning, but this doesn't just apply to social media, some of these rules, it applies to interviews, video recordings, anything that you do.
Statements to the media, correct.
Okay.
Now, there is one major exception. The one major exception is if you are involved in an election, you are on the ballot or preparing to be on the ballot, and you're running for office, that is a different environment, a different forum. And that is not viewed in the eyes of the law as any type of official action on behalf of the district. That's viewed strictly as your own personal activity because you're running for office. And, you know, the laws of our country protect candidates' abilities to campaign. And so campaigning is a completely separate area.
So, I believe then, weren't there a couple items that were sent down to the 6th District for review in another case tied into that case?
There was. I mean, that's really where the Freed case got started, was at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the court in Cincinnati determined that there was a certain standard for what is and is not state action. And then a different circuit court, I think it was based in Seattle, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, they viewed it differently. And so there was a conflict between the circuits, the Sixth, which governs Ohio, and the Ninth. And that's why the U.S. Supreme Court took the case and decided it in March the way that they did, because the court felt like they needed to resolve that conflict among the circuits. And it was a unanimous decision written by Justice Barrett.
So I have a question
Sure.
about a post, whether this would be personal or acting as a board member. So it says, calling all stakeholders, please come and voice your opinion because one of our Board of Education members has asked that this item be placed on this Thursday evening's board agenda. As a result, the item is on the agenda. If you have an opinion, I suggest you show up and speak loud and clear. Would that be acting as a person or as a board member?
I mean, the court in the Freed decision that came out in March, as I mentioned, said that determining whether there's state action involved is a fact-intensive decision. So that would require a much deeper analysis of all of the posts. The key is if there is any kind of decision that is offered in that post that I think is one of the kind of the most influential factors that the court looks at. In other words, if you have the authority as a board member to do something and then you talk about doing it in that post, then you're probably functioning as a state actor. That post alone is definitely in that gray area. I would be concerned about it for sure. And my advice is that if we want to get messages out to our community about the content of our agenda, then the district ought to push that information through a district account, in a highly regulated environment where we say, these are the items on the agenda, or here's a link to the agenda. If we want to do that sort of thing, then the district ought to do it, and not individual board members, because that gray area is very concerning to me. And I started out by saying I'm not a fan of board members using social media to comment on any board business, not only because there's potential liability, but also because it can be very divisive.
And we don't want to create any of that divisiveness and what can turn into rowdy public behavior at board meetings. So, thank you for coming and explaining the boardsmanship, and which falls under ethics and being united as a district.
Okay, and I wanted to thank you. I did review, again, we have a board manual, and one of the things it talks about is respecting the will of the majority, and once a vote has been, or a motion is passed or failed, that the board has spoken. And so that is, it says opinion should be voiced during the discussion phase of the motion. The product of the vote is a board, not an individual outcome. It is recommended that members of the community or media who request an individual board member's perspective should be directed to the meeting's official video and minutes. I just wanted to say I did review that. There's also, yeah, I think that's all I want to cover right now, because I just would like to call for a unity and working together for the benefit of the children in this district.
So we cannot pick apart the board manual then, because there's a lot of things that aren't followed today. Meaning how we add an agenda item to the meeting, that's not followed. How we do business at the district, that is not followed. So if we want to pick out one item, we have to pay attention to everything. We can't just pick and choose. The district, we have district administrators that are here to do the district business by the will of the board. We've given direction to our administrators, and yet we had 3 other people that walked out of here doing their own work, not waiting for the district to come back and give us their recommendations. So again, it can't be one piece. It has to be all or nothing, and we have to start working together, I agree, but we can't just pick and choose.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a couple different items there.
We are.
Yeah,
We're talking about the board and how we work.
Let me finish. You were able to finish. So I think we're talking about a couple different items there. One of the items was on September 12th, we had a work session, and that turned into an agenda meeting, which turned it into a board meeting. And at that meeting, we had clear board discussion about an 8-classroom addition at Riverview. Okay, and in that meeting, we discussed what would be called an immediate need, which that is, and we also discussed what you're talking about, a 5-year facilities plan, of which we had not had the plan, the meetings completed and the information presented to the board as yet. And as Mr. Keeney said in that meeting, those two things can go together because you have a short term and a long term. It's not either or. It's not like the board would need to wait for the comprehensive 5-year facilities plan report before the board moved to solve a problem in the district. So I don't know how that is problematic.
Because we agreed at that meeting, as a board, we gave direction to Dr. Rotino and the administration to walk out and to put together a recommendation that's supposed to be delivered next month, or at the end of this month. And nobody waited for that, for both a long-term and a short-term plan. We all agreed to it. But yet, other work was done, and an emergency item was put on the board agenda right before the board meeting. So that's where the problem is. We gave direction to our superintendent and the administration of what to do, but yet nobody could wait for them to come back with their recommendations, and that's the problem.
So when we were in that meeting, we gave the recommendation for the 5-year facilities plan, not the immediate need presentation.
We can pull it.
We did not in that, we were talking about a 5-year facilities plan because it had been taking, at that point, 6.5 to 7 months. We had not had any updates and reporting on what was going on. And we became aware, at least I became aware, of a serious condition in the district, which was the overcrowding at Riverview. And unfortunately, leading up to that moment in time, I had not been informed of that as a board member. I don't know if any other board members were informed of that situation at Riverview, but I had not been. I had to learn from the community.
Yeah.
So as I learned that, I started to investigate and gather information. And then, as I looked at it, it became to me, a very serious situation in that we are found out, this is a detail, -3 classrooms over there, and we had to take away 2 special needs in the music room, and that to me is a problem. And so when we have 4 new developments feeding into Riverview and we're already -3 classrooms, that's an immediate need. So in that meeting, we were talking about as a board, because the question was asked, well, when would I like that long-term report? And I said next week, and you said too soon. So you asked questions, what would be acceptable, and there was an acceptable date for the 5-year facilities plan, not an immediate plan. Okay, the immediate move is totally different from the 5-year facilities plan.
So,
But
Mr. Fischel, I'm
you're
not-
attempting to put those together.
No, I'm not going to argue. We have a video of it. We'll go back and look at it. It was a recommendation for them to bring back a plan for both the short-term and long-term so that we could look at them together. I'm not going to sit here and say he said, she said. I mean, that's what it was, and that was what we walked away from the table with.
Can I make
So-
a comment, please? Sometimes there's changes in the real world, and we have to adapt to them in time. And I think this casement development is one of them, plus other developments that are happening in the Riverview District. And that sometimes accelerates your timeline. That's all I have to say.
So I would like to just go on record as saying that we've known about classroom sizes. We get that information on a regular basis from our administration, so it's not something that we have not been aware of. We also have been aware of developments that are going on in our district in not just one area. We do know that, which is again, the reason why we asked for the facility plan, long-range facility plan. A long-term facility plan includes the near term as well as the long-term. If it's a 5-year plan, it includes year 1 in addition to year 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe beyond. So it's not just, hey, it's 5 years from now. It's now and 5 years from now. I seem to recall at the meeting that you indicated on September 12th when we, quote, had some lengthy conversation about an addition at Riverview. It was Mr. Keeney speaking, and it was a comment in some information that he was providing or some introspect that he was providing from his perspective. It was not a board conversation. It was just a statement presented by Mr. Keeney. I remember this because when you presented that information at our Buildings and Grounds meeting, I was kind of floored because that was the first time I had ever seen plans for an addition to Riverview, and I did not know where those had come from. So I just want to go on record as saying we as a board, as a table, agreed that we would, in collaboration, allow the superintendent and the administration to go forward and find out come back to the table with their 5-year recommendation. And not a week later, we had agenda items when we hadn't even heard the facility plan yet.
So I want to bring us back.
So, right, like,
I'm going to bring us back real quick because according to the agenda and what we're doing here today is training on the social media. I guess I just wanted to point out that we can't pick and choose what pieces of our board handbook we're going to follow or policy we're going to follow. We need to follow it all. I don't want to go outside of what we put on the agenda tonight, so I just want to bring that back. If we want to talk about Riverview again in an old business, new business during our upcoming meeting, we can do that. Any other thoughts or questions on the social media piece?
that would also include YouTube videos.
That's what I asked. It's videos, social media, all social media platforms, right?
Yes.
Right? Any other questions on social media? All right. All right, so Mr. Fischel, I think number 3 is yours.
The Riverside Local School District Board of Education will send out by email a communication to the Riverside Local School District to inform about the progress, planning, and direction of the Board of Education. The Board of Education designates Scott Fischel to meet with Director of Marketing and Communications on Wednesday, October 9th, 2024, to formulate the email communication. The email will be sent on Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. So I make a motion to accept that. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
I have some grave concern about one individual being designated by the board. I believe that should be an administrative function. We have individuals on our administrative team who are supposed to have those roles and do that. And generally speaking, when we've had these sorts of communications that we would like to direct as a board to go out to the community, communications director will prepare those in conjunction with the treasurer and our superintendent, and they come back to us for review, and we can provide comment, input, whatever, but I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of this is.
So I've been on the board a little over 2.5 years, and the Board of Education has not communicated in a form like this to the district so that people know what's going on. People can come to the meetings, people can watch the meetings, people can read the minutes, but as we all know, very few people do that. So an email going out to everybody is going to be more read, and people will be made more aware of what's going on in the district. This is a Board of Education. This is the board's communication, not the administration's communication. And so I think it's very important that the board let the community know what the board is doing. And I think that's very important since it's the community's tax dollars that pay for every operation in this school district. So I think it's real simple. We're just going to communicate information. Anyone and everyone can have input. Send over suggestions, thoughts, opinions, ideas by email, and all that can be looked at and considered. And when the email is sent out, we can continue to talk about it because I think this would be a good ongoing thing to do. Policy possibly even, so that we can communicate with as many people in the school district as possible. Now, the emails we have are limited, right, Nick? It's limited to mostly the parents of students and
For the most
related
part,
people.
yeah. For the most part, it's parents, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're still missing a lot of the voting public. And so we can look at how to involve those people so they can be informed what's going on too. Because unless you have children that come here or grandchildren or other relatives, it's unlikely that other people are aware of what's going on. So I think it's very important we communicate.
So first of all, I don't disagree with that. However, if we are going to do something like that under new business, we should talk about that and develop a plan to implement that. And if that's going to be the case of how we would like to do things, once that plan is developed, that communication, I would think, should be deferred to our board president. That's where I would expect that communication to come out if we wanted to communicate to the public.
Well, I appreciate that. Is there any other comment?
Yeah, what are we progress planning and direction of what what are we trying to communicate, I guess?
Just what the board is doing,
I mean,
what the actions of the board are, that's all.
That's what we have, board briefs, and
Like I said, very few people read those things or attend the meetings or watch the meetings. People are much more likely to open an email, and some of that information that's in the board briefs can be included in that. I think that's a great idea. I think it's very important we communicate. Probably the most important thing in life is communication. I just think we should be doing that, a better job of doing that as the board.
I just want to make sure that it doesn't come out being the board briefs according to Scott Fischel. I would like it to be a board communication. That would
Well,
make
certainly,
sense.
as we do this, and we develop this and we go forward, you know, we can talk about the different things that are going on. If there's something that goes out that anyone disagrees with, certainly we can talk about that and have a path forward that makes sense for everybody, so.
Then why can't we have some conversation, instead of a board agenda item directing this to happen tomorrow? Why can't we have some conversation about how we process this and a process going forward, that we can have an implementation date set when we want like that to happen, but we haven't even talked about,
Yeah.
it.
And I don't, this timeline to be
That's tomorrow.
completed tomorrow and sent out tomorrow, that will not give the board time to look at it and to provide any feedback. The other piece is we cannot discuss it via email, so we do need to get at the board table to discuss it. So, yeah, I mean, we can't have it prepared and emailed the same day. Plus, we don't have emails for anybody besides our parents, correct?
We have some manually created lists, like we have some business leaders, like anytime we do a survey, we collect email addresses that we could put into lists through our communication system.
Okay.
Yeah,
Our website, for those who choose to sign up for this feature, it's a e-news sign up where they get an email every Sunday with basically just links from our website.
I get those.
Anybody can sign up for that.
And we did attempt to get more of the seniors.
We always try to get people to sign up for
Yeah,
that.
I know.
And
They don't all.
there's like 600 people total on it.
Okay.
So we need broader communication.
Well, I think your communication survey said we were doing pretty good. Where was the gap
From
set?
what we reported over the summer, yeah.
Okay.
So do you know about how many emails the district has right now? The number?
Parents or like community?
Well, emails. So, like, you might have two parents,
Yeah, so so through our student enrollment, we probably have 6,000 to 7,000 plus. You know, you figure about 4,100 students, and not all have two parents,
right?
but so it's about 7,000. When we're doing school communications, that's who we email. But when we do like today, we put out an email about the two facilities meetings. So we included community leaders, which is about 70 people. The 108 people who initially were interested in joining the community facilities group from the summer. We have another group that I use for the business sponsorships that are close to 250 to 300. But generally we just email the parents unless it's a broader community issue
Right. And
or
so
update.
I can appreciate the idea of developing something and the board talking about it. The problem is you have the Open Meetings Act and the Sunshine, so the board would be limited to board meeting discussions. And as we know, typically once a month, maybe a work session, maybe once or twice a month. And so the process would be slowed down. By the time you're going to communicate, the information is old. And I think we need to have regular communication once or twice a month, going out to the community. And some of it might even be redundant, but sometimes that's helpful and necessary. So I just think that it's important that we as a board do a better job of communicating. And since I've been on the board, I've not seen the board do anything like this. And the comments I get from the community are that I have no idea what's going on. What are you guys doing? And so I'm trying to communicate with the people so they do know what's going on. And I think as a board, we would all want that. And again, we can all have input.
Not in this timeline,
Pardon me?
not in this timeline.
Well, you can email tonight even. And so for the next meeting, there can be emails for the next couple weeks.
Well,
And
if you haven't put this together, if you're, quote, you and Nick are going to put this together tomorrow, I can't email you tonight to review it, because it's not done yet, unless you already have something
well,
pre-written.
again, can't review it becomes, once you have more than two people, it becomes
Correct.
a sunshine law problem. And
That's
so-
why we have to have a process.
So functionally, you can't do that.
Right, so which is why we have to have a process, which is why this doesn't work, which is why we put out the pipeline to the entire district, and we do that numerous times throughout the year. And if the board wants a page in the pipeline, we could certainly probably have that, added to a page of the pipeline, have an address from the board president, whatever. We could do other things. We just don't, this is not a planned process. This is not planned. This is just mandate.
Well, if the board agrees to communicate with the public tonight, then I think this would be an ongoing occurrence so that we could let everyone know what's going on. And I think all the board members can have input on that. And again, emails, communications like that are informational, and it's not a board meeting. So informational pieces that can be incorporated into a communication would be more than acceptable. Am I correct on that, Dan?
Yes.
So again, I'm just going to ask, why does it need to be a resolution on the board agenda? Why can't it just be a topic that we address and make it a process and something that we would like to implement as a program, whatever? If it's a board agenda item, it now becomes a mandate that this happens tomorrow under this direction and under this. I just don't even know what to say. I believe
Okay.
this is like the wrong approach. This becomes like a dictatorship. We're going to do this instead of actively discussing a process collaboratively as a board.
So since I've been on the board for 2.5 years, processes and committees that, you know, 5-year facilities plan, things like that have just taken so long to develop. And when you're looking at communicating once or twice a month, you don't have time to meet once or twice a month, because then you're a month late on the information. This is all good information that'll go to the public, let them know what we're doing. We have a CTE wing that's going to be being built. We have an 8-classroom addition that's going to be being built. People being updated regularly on what's going on is going to be important and valuable. They want to know that. That's the feedback I'm getting from the community anyway.
But that's
That is
not
also
the
why we
feedback
have
we
a district
got from the
website.
community.
Can I would like to say that we did employ a process that allowed us to all submit information when we were doing the superintendent's and the treasurer's evaluation. We each provided our information, and that was given to you, and you compiled that by yourself. And then sent it out to us to look over. So there was a process that worked. And so I would suggest something like that. Maybe, you know, as far as the timeline, giving us a little more time to submit something rather than tomorrow. If that, I think that's a little ambitious, but I really do think that, you know, the communication does need to be timely, and I think we have a process that we've used before to work. And in this case, we would be engaging Nick because he's the expert. So.
I don't know about that.
Nick does a great job.
Yeah, and I was going to ask Dan, our board attorney, are there other district boards that do this, that, you know, send out communications like this?
Sure, of course, yeah. I mean, I think board to community communications are critical, and it needs to be a part of the district's overall communication plan and strategy. You know, we covered this topic, as you may remember, last time we were together, and you know, my view of these things are that the preferred approach is that you do it together when you can. Knowing that that's not always possible, the next best approach is to delegate that authority to one of you, and then, you know, carry that out with the assistance of the administrative team, like Nick and Chris and Gary. So, you know, that's what you're talking about doing here, and that's legal and it works. What we don't want is what a number of you have already mentioned, but I'll just emphasize it, and that is some kind of round robin discussion of a draft by email or telephone or text. So either do it as a group when you can, or delegate the authority to one of you to take care of that.
So, and if you're going to communicate, let's say once every 2 weeks, how would it work functionally that the board would be able to get together and do that?
They wouldn't. You're going to have to delegate to one of you,
Right.
for sure.
And so that's what, Ms. Brewster, that's what this is tonight. It's impossible for the board to be collaborative and get together and share ideas. Not only does it break the law, we don't meet that often. We would have to meet once or twice a week. And I think that's unreasonable. I'm not so sure that for communication purposes, we would want to accelerate the number of times we meet. But I think it's important to make the community aware of everything we're doing. And I think the pipeline is great, and the emails that Nick sent out are great. I think we're going to another level here, and again, we have a lot of things that are starting to happen. And I think regular communication is going to be valuable to the people in the community.
How is this going to be any different than Dr. Rotino's videos and things that he sends out? I mean, what are we going to say that he has not already covered?
It won't have my face on it, which is
I
a
know,
good
but
thing.
like,
Well,
It'll have Scott's face on it.
well,
or that our administration can't already put together on our
Right.
behalf.
well, we met for, what, an hour and 50 minutes last week? And we had a very nice conversation and discussed some items. And we discussed a lot of items in that meeting that the people aren't aware of, but they're general business items in the district. And there's going to be so many things. And what I'm saying is more communication is better rather than less communication. And so I think it's important and it's valuable. And I would suggest we need to do this.
So how about if we do a rotational approach on who gets to collaborate with the superintendent instead of just one person? Like, we all have different ways of saying things. I don't know. I don't know how this is going to be developed. I guess that's my problem, is I'm not exactly sure what's going to be put in here. I'd like to have a process by which we have a conversation on what that means, what's going to be included.
So what I would suggest is, let's get a start, and then as we go, if we want to make adjustments, we can make adjustments. There's a possibility of each member of the board doing it at each different communication point, and we can discuss these things, but we need to get it started to actually get it started.
Well, again, I agree with that. I'm not discounting this at all, Scott. Trust me, I think it's a good idea, but maybe, again, instead of a board agenda item, maybe we should be discussing what that process looks like. Maybe we should have the communication structured around our committees, like, and this is what's happening in the personnel committee, and this is what, but we haven't had that conversation, so like right now, this just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel good.
Well, this is just an initial communication point. Once we get it started, we can have all of these discussions, like anything
We have to have the discussions before we vote on an agenda.
Like anything that's new, when you get moving on something, you have to start somewhere. And it might not be perfect, okay? There might be adjustments, there might be changes, there might be great ideas that come to the table, and we as a board might agree that, hey, let's only do this once a month, let's only do it once every 2 months, let's do it every week, let's do it every 2 weeks, let's rotate the people who are doing it, the point person on it. We can have all of those discussions. But I would like to get it started, because there's a lot going on, and I think the public needs to be aware of it.
Well, right now, I'm just going to say that we can't have any conversation about it, because right now, this says we're going to do this tomorrow, and that Scott Fishel is going to meet with the director. Like, that's all it says, that we're just going to do this tomorrow, and that, like, that's what I'm saying, we haven't discussed this. This is not, to me, a board agenda item. It's a matter of board business, this is new business, we want to implement this, great. It doesn't need to be a board agenda item. I'm just confused about the agenda.
So this
item.
accounts for one time. Ms. Brewster and I agree with you. I think we need to move that last date out sometime for us to at least see what the communication looks like.
Right.
Would everybody approve the one time if we move that date out to the future so that we can take a look at the communication?
Yeah, because I'm getting the impression that, like maybe they meet and they rough out something, but then we get to see it, but then we're going to put our own information or suggestions
Well, again,
in.
we cannot.
I know,
You can't
so
do it
I
by
agree
email.
that the last date needs to be
You
adjusted.
can't do that.
What,
even
the
if-
9th you would
You
prefer?
can't have multiple board people having input because it breaks the sunshine law.
That's what's wrong with
You
this.
can't do that.
That's what's wrong with this, is that.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that if you have any suggestions for the newsletter, let's say with Curriculum and Program Committee, that I'd say, well, I would really like to see this in it, and I just send it to Mr. Fishel, then those two work on it and put it in there.
I want to see it before it goes out.
Oh, yeah, aren't we
Well,
seeing it before
well,
it goes out?
Dan, are other board members allowed to see it before it goes out? Because if you see it, you
Well,
probably.
it would be like
But it's
seeing
like coming out with
the
my
final
name on it, but I didn't see
evaluations.
it.
So yes, of course, you can see it before it goes out.
Yeah.
The problem is that if you see something in it you don't like, you can't really talk about it unless you wait till your next meeting or schedule a special meeting. Or if you feel like something should be in it that's not in it, you would not be able to make that suggestion by email, telephone, text, unless you talked about it at your next meeting or you schedule a special meeting. You'd have to just receive it and say nothing.
Whereas if we as a board decided that we wanted to direct our administration to provide a summary of all the committee meetings that happened for the month of July, whatever, like, that would be something that they would be able to do. We would be able to provide our input because we are already attending a meeting. They already have notes. They're like, I'm not exact, I'm just.
It's like the Auburn Career Center email that we sent out. We collaborated at the board table before we sent that out and made sure it represented everybody's perspective at the table. So that's the whole point. So that's the concern with this whole plan, is that we can provide it, we will not get to see it or be able to comment based on these dates before it gets sent out.
So that's assuming that there's going to be problematic items in there. And what I would suggest is that let's get the ball started. Let's see how it goes. If the board is saying, hey, there's a lot of things we don't like about this, we can have another discussion. This is not policy. This is not passing a policy tonight. Okay? And so as we go forward, the ideal, in my opinion, would be that we do create a policy and we have a policy item that's followed. And of course, all the board would have input into that. And I know we could do that in the policy meeting. Ms. Grassi, do you know when the next policy meeting would be?
No, we haven't gotten our Neola updates yet, so.
Okay, so then there's another delay. There's not a policy meeting scheduled.
This doesn't
Okay,
need a
so
policy, though.
This is,
agreement.
I'm saying, moving forward, ideally, we'd create a policy out of this. Instead of having an agenda item at every board meeting, we'd create a policy and follow that policy. And of course, all board members would have input on that, and we would extrude something out that everyone's happy with, and we could move forward with it. So the idea is to work together, let the community know what we're doing as a district. I think we need to do a better job as a board. And again, I go back, I've been on a little over 2.5 years, and the board has not done this previously. The board has counted on the communications that are in place through the administration, which are all good, okay? I'm looking at increasing that and making it better. That's it. People want to know what's going on. I'm getting the feedback from people. They want to know more of what's going on. And I would also add, as we're moving forward, there's going to be a lot more going on. We have construction projects coming up, and just like with everything that was presented tonight, there are a lot of details that we can send out to people. And in this process, I think we will be do a better job of that and be more complete in our information.
If I may, how I read this is for a meeting tomorrow to be sent out tomorrow. It doesn't say it would be continuing or anything else. So why don't we give it a chance tomorrow, see how it goes. We can discuss it at the next meeting to see if it worked or it didn't work, and then we can make have the discussion and a finalization at that time.
Well, that's all I'm saying. I mean, this isn't something that's a policy that's created. This is a one-time event that hopefully will continue, but at the next board meeting, we can discuss it.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable sending something out without seeing it first. That's a communication on behalf of the board. So we can call for roll if you want.
Can we modify make it a Friday, October 11th email to be sent? Because you're just meeting tomorrow. And that way, if anybody wanted to send anything, any thoughts, they could be
We're
incorporated.
saying we can't do that.
We can send thoughts, but we cannot review it and give feedback.
Right,
No.
you can
So
send,
I don't-
Just
Dan,
like
you
you
can
did
send
with
your
the
suggestion, thoughts, opinions,
evaluations.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so you can do that. I mean, do you have suggestion, thoughts, and opinions you would like in the email? That's the question.
Hearing none.
No?
Mine's not about suggestions, thoughts, or I want to see it before it goes out, and I want to be able to provide feedback.
but you can't
So-
do that.
Well, that's fine.
against
So
the
that's
law.
how I know how I will vote. So
Okay.
we can go ahead.
All right, so not hearing any further discussion, Gary, can you take the roll?
Dennis Keeney,
Aye.
Lori Kniske,
Nay.
Belinda Grassi,
Nay.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Scott Fishel.
Motion carried. Next meeting announcements, Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting,
So
October
I
15th.
didn't vote yet.
You just said Scott Fishel, didn't you?
I don't know if he.
I didn't vote though.
Oh,
Aye,
I thought I heard you, sorry.
that's okay. I just wanted to make it official.
Motion carried. Next meeting, Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting, October 15th, 2024 at 7:30 a.m. Curriculum and Programs Committee meeting, October 16th, 7:30 a.m. Finance and Personnel Committee meeting, October 16th, 8:30 a.m. And Board of Education meeting, October 24th at 6 p.m. Be it resolved that the Riverside Local District Board of Education hereby adjourns to executive session at 7:49 p.m.
Second?
I'm not finished yet.
Oh, sorry.
To discuss the purchase of property in the Riverside Local School District Board of Education hereby designates all matters discussed in this executive session as strictly confidential and finds that this designation is warranted because of the status of this matter and the need to preserve confidentiality to properly conduct the business of this Board of Education. Can I second?
Second.
Thank you. Can you please call roll?
Lori Knessky,
Aye.
Linda Grassi,
Nay.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Keeney.
Aye.
Motion carried.